What is good, everyone? I hope you are all doing well. Today we are going to be asking and answering the question, is SLI really worth it? I wanted to do this video for a couple of reasons, but the main one really is that I have a long history with SLI. One of the earliest tech videos I did on this channel was for SLI when I got my GTX 770 Lightnings, the MSI cards that I installed in my system back in 2013 when I was trying to put together this epic rig so that I could play Battlefield 4 at max settings, and I was certainly able to do that. I continued along with SLI for quite a while, eventually getting 780s in SLI, then GTX 980s in SLI, following that up with 980 Ti's in SLI, which was the last SLI configuration that I had, because once the GTX 1080 came out, I picked up that card and I had planned to get a second card, but at the time, I really didn't feel like I needed it because I was getting all the performance I needed in the games that I was playing with the GTX 1080. And this year? Yeah, the 1080 Ti, I think it came out this year. Nvidia sent me over the GTX 1080 Ti. And ever since then, I still have not needed one because I played mostly at 1440p, 144 hertz, and now I've switched over to playing at ultra wide. And the 1080 Ti can handle that really well, and I haven't felt the need to go out and pick up SLI. But recently, AVA got in touch with me, AVA Direct, that is. You can check out their website at the link in the description below. And they wanted to send me over one of their systems, the Avant-Garde system to be exact. I'm going to be doing a full video on this system probably next week or the week after, so be on the lookout for that video coming up in your sub boxes soon. But today we're going to be focusing mainly on SLI performance because this system is rocking dual GTX 1080 Ti's in SLI, and it looks absolutely amazing. One of the nicest looking systems that I've ever personally had in my possession, and it's got some killer specs in there as well, which should really help us out with SLI scaling and not holding the system back in any way, at least as far as the hardware is concerned. So for that, the CPU is the i7-7700K, which is currently the fastest gaming CPU that you can own. It came at 4.7 gigahertz actually from AVA Direct, but I wasn't happy with that for my testing. I wanted to go ahead and bump it up even more, so I increased it up to 5 gigahertz, which ran very stable at 1.35 volts. For the system memory, it's got 32 gigabytes of HyperX DDR4 RAM. It's also running two 250 gigabyte NVMe SSDs in RAID 0, so ultra fast SSDs, I should say, where I had all of the games installed inside of the system. It's also got a 1 terabyte mechanical drive. The CPU is water cooled and everything, and it's a gorgeous system. And it's like I said, video is going to be coming on the entire system in the next week or two, but this really is giving us the best case scenario for testing SLI, because very often the CPU can kind of get in the way of SLI scaling if your CPU is not fast enough, because it needs to be able to process all of the frames that both of the graphics cards are pumping out into the system before it can be displayed back to you. So you need to have a nice overclock usually to get good SLI scaling. And if you want to go and check out AVA Direct's website, the people that provided this system out to me, the link to that is going to be down in the description below, as well as my promo code, which will help get you free shipping on the system, and it also helps me earn a few bucks as well. That promo code is JPFREESHIP, so if you use that when you're checking out, you should get free shipping on anything that you order, like a full system, laptop, or whatever else they have on there. You can go ahead and order and use that code and get free shipping right to your door. Now, on the 1080 Ti's, I was using the latest drivers, which is 385.69, and right away, as soon as I started testing, I was instantly reminded of all of the headaches that can come along with SLI. The first game I went and booted up just to make sure everything was running properly and was stable was Metro Last Light, and at first it was only running on a single GPU, and I went and Googled around and I found that I had to actually use a different form of frame rendering, which is alternate frame rendering 2 in the Nvidia control panel. They have AFR1, AFR2, or usually you can use the Nvidia recommended, so I ended up using AFR2 to actually get both GPUs being used. Otherwise, it was defaulting to running on a single card and allowing the second card to pick up for advanced PhysX. So that wasn't good enough. I wanted to get full SLI scaling, so I had to use AFR2. Other headaches that can kind of come up with SLI are having to use a program called Nvidia Inspector, which if you use SLI and you are trying to get the best performance possible, you are going to find out about that program really fast because there's a lot more options in there compared to the Nvidia control panel so that you can kind of get the best scaling possible. You may have to dip into things like SLI bits. If you've never heard of that, basically these are the little lines of code that kind of tell the SLI cards how to communicate with the rest of the system. Some games, when they first come out, will not have SLI bits at all, as the developers and Nvidia need to add in SLI support, for any particular title. But sometimes early on in a game's release, you can actually go in and maybe grab SLI bits from another game, maybe something that is running on the same engine, and possibly get decent performance. Or sometimes modifying the SLI bits can get you even better performance than what Nvidia and the developers of that game are providing. And I used to do guides on this back when I was running SLI as a hardcore SLI user, so I am certainly no stranger to having to get in there in Nvidia Inspector and kind of dabble with settings to get the best performance possible. So right away, like I said, I was reminded of all of those headaches that come along with SLI, which is why I kind of got away from it to begin with, because running a single GPU, you don't have any of these issues. Most of the time, you just get a new game, and it usually uses 99% of your card and runs pretty darn well, especially if you go for a top-end GPU like a 1080 Ti, which is more than enough for me for 1440p as well as 1440p ultra-wide at 3440 by 1440. So yeah, like I said, I was reminded of all of those issues that I used to have with SLI and kind of why I got away from it to begin with. So yeah, that was kind of my introduction back into SLI. So not really off to a good start. So I started testing a bunch of other games, and only a couple of the games that I tested actually showed an advantage for SLI, and it was mostly at 4K, which were Battlefield 1 and The Witcher 3. Out of all the games I tested, those were the only two games where I really saw a huge advantage for SLI, where you were seeing like upwards of like 80 to 90% scaling on both of the GPUs. And that really just kind of leaves you, it just leaves you upset at the end of the day, because you go out and you spend, $600 or $700 per 1080 Ti to throw into a system or whatever card you happen to be using. And, you see your GPU sitting there in MSI Afterburner at like 50 to 60%, and you're just like, there's like another 80% of power that's just sitting on the goddamn table, which is like, that's like $500-600 that you're just leaving like out in the wind because the developers or Nvidia haven't bothered to get off of their ass to optimize the game for SLI. So it just really sucks. And I was reminded of all of this. It kind of all came back to me, all these games I used to play where I had to sit there and mess around with settings for hours and days and wait for patches and drivers to try to get the performance that I felt like I deserved for going out and spending. With 1080 Ti's, you're looking at like $1,400 for two graphics cards. If you go out and spend $1,400 on two graphics cards, you definitely want to see all $1,400 getting utilized. And I'm sorry to say, in the majority of the games, you're just not going to see that. And it sucks. It sucks every time that it happens. Most of the games that I was testing here were actually struggling to scale more than around 60 to 70% at 1440p and even 4K, which I didn't expect. I thought at 4K we would get much better scaling than at 1440p, but as I mentioned, it was only a couple titles like Battlefield 1 and The Witcher 3. In PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds, I was actually seeing negative scaling where both cards were going down below 50% utilization, which would tell us we would certainly get better performance on a single card. Because if two 1080 Ti's are running around 40% usage on each, then you're going to get better performance on a single card. That's just math, bro. That's just math. So here's a look at our average FPS, and I'll also show you the 1% lows here for 2560 by 1440 and 3840 by 2160. And you'll see that all of these games are running really well, honestly. 1440p, a lot of these games are getting up over 100 FPS. Even at 4K, we're getting pretty darn decent performance. But you can see the issue very clearly with like Grand Theft Auto 5, which got 112 FPS at 1440p on ultra settings, and at 4K, it got 106 FPS. So we only lost 6 frames per second by going up to 3840 by 2160 4K, which should tell you that it is certainly running into a scaling issue, and we are not getting the full potential of those cards. And you could certainly see that as well in the side-by-side comparisons that I'm showing in this video, which is the real story here. Because if you're just looking at these average FPS and the 1% low on paper, it's going to look like, oh yeah, you're getting a lot of FPS there. But unless you're really analyzing and looking at the cards and seeing how much utilization you're getting, that is really going to tell you the full picture. So I wanted to go back and I wanted to test on a few titles here with single card versus SLI, which I did at 1440p on ultra settings, so we can just kind of see what is going on here and seeing how much performance we're actually gaining. So I started off with Rainbow Six Siege, which is my favorite game right now. It's pretty much all that I play. And on a single card, I got an average of 143 FPS, and on SLI, I got an average of 125 FPS. So I actually got worse performance using two GTX 1080 Ti's than I did on a single graphics card. The next game up that I tested was Metro Last Light, which got exactly the same performance in SLI versus a single card, 126 FPS average at 1440p on Ultra. The only game that I tested that with single card versus SLI that showed a gain was Deus Ex Mankind Divided, which got an average of 72 FPS in SLI and 69 FPS on a single card. So whoop-de-doo, another $700 for a GTX 1080 Ti and you're getting 3 FPS? Like, are you fucking kidding me, Nvidia? Like, what are they doing right now? What is Nvidia and these developers doing right now with SLI? It's almost like they've completely forgotten it. I know when the 10 series came out, they pretty much said that they were abandoning 3 and 4 card SLI, but 2 card SLI feels like it's been forgotten as well. Like, yes, technically it'll work. You can use both cards, but you're hardly going to get any performance gains unless you're really looking to game at like 4K. And even that's only on a few select titles where we saw a large advantage of scaling, like on Battlefield 1 and The Witcher 3. In the other games, we weren't seeing a lot of, a very big difference there as far as scaling is concerned. So which is totally went against what I expected. I thought at 4K, where we're more GPU bound, we would see very good scaling on both of the 1080 Ti's, but that just wasn't the case. So all in all, my takeaway from this at the end of the day is that absolutely, to answer the question, SLI is not worth it unless you know a certain game is going to perform really well with SLI, and that's the only game that you want to play. Because in the majority of games right now, it doesn't feel like newer titles are getting optimized very well from Nvidia or the developers, so SLI is just simply not worth it. You're just kind of throwing money away. I mean, don't get me wrong, you can build a beautiful looking system and it looks really nice with 2 cards in there, kind of filling out the rest of the PCI slots and all of that. And if you got money to just completely burn, then I guess you can go ahead and do SLI. But for most of you out there, it's probably not going to be worth it. For maybe the people that are sitting out there with something like, let's say a GTX 1060, and maybe you came into $300 and you want to go out and buy another GTX 1060 and throw it in your system for SLI, I would tell you, do not do it. Like, if you got that little bit extra money, if you can, sell your other GTX 1060 over on eBay, because they are going for around $250 to $300 even used, because they're very good for Zcash because they have pretty good power efficiency. I would say sell that, take that money, and put it towards a GTX 1080 or a 1080 Ti if you're, toying around with the idea of SLI, because it is simply not worth it in 2017 when you can get a 1080 Ti and it'll completely crush 2 of those lower cards in SLI. And even if you're trying to get 2 of the top-end GPUs in SLI, it's still not worth it. Especially if, you're probably not on a budget at that point, but unless you just literally have money to throw away, it is not worth going out and investing in SLI right now until Nvidia and game developers decide to actually start supporting it again and giving us good SLI scaling performance in, modern titles that are coming out. And hopefully as soon as the games come out, because you don't want to sit around for months waiting for a goddamn SLI patch. Trust me when I tell you, from all of my experience previous with SLI, it sucks. It's horrible. You end up getting into this mindset where you're like, I'm not playing this game unless I'm seeing my GPUs over 90% usage. This is the mindset that you get into when you spend that much money on SLI. You basically put out like a blockade against any games that are not supporting it or are not giving you good scaling, because you feel like you're leaving money out on the table, and it's a terrible feeling. So I cannot strongly suggest enough to stay away from SLI You know, for your gaming needs, a single 1080 Ti right now can easily handle 1440p, and even for like a 144 hertz monitor, you're going to see great advantages there with that. And I play at 3440 by 1440, and there are not many games where I can't get over 60 frames per second completely maxed out, except for some very unoptimized titles like Ghost Recon Wildlands or something, which is just optimized awful because, well, it's a Ubisoft game. Rainbow Six Siege is really one of the only games they've actually done right as far as performance is concerned, and that game performs great even at ultra wide on a single 1080 Ti. I get over 100 FPS, especially on the latest patch, which has just improved optimization really great. So yeah, I'm going to go ahead and get on out of here, guys. Please let me know your thoughts, as always, down in the comments below. I look forward to our discussion. If you enjoyed this video on whether or not SLI is worth it, then please leave a like on it and subscribe if you're not already. And I'm going to get out of here. I'll catch you guys next time. Peace.